Hello, everyone. The Canadian Cybersecurity Network is excited to be hosting our first monthly webinar as a part of newly monthly cybersecurity topics of 2023. Today, our webinar is about privacy in connected world. We'll explore what privacy means in a connected world, the danger and how to protect yourself, your client, and your business. We have Cat Coode from Binary 2, Sharon Bauer from Bubble Data Consulting, and Addison Brown of Zscaler. The session and monthly topic is sponsored by Zscaler, and it's hosted on Zoom events. Platform provided is by Protection. Unfortunately, Anne Chulakin couldn't join today because of some kind of emergency, and if she will join later on, we definitely want to hear more from her. Before we start with the topics, I would like everyone to kind of tell more about themselves. Sharon, can you please start and tell us more about yourself and the company?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with Kat and Addison as well. So my name is Sharon Bauer. I'm the founder of Bamboo Data Consulting. I'm an ex-lawyer, and I help companies, mostly small to medium businesses, become compliant with their privacy obligations, but even more importantly, go above what the law says and try to earn the trust of their consumers so that they can maintain the loyalty of their customers, collect more data in an ethical and responsible way, and of course, get more profit. So that's what I do. I operationalize privacy. And I've also had the privilege of working with Kat, who I'm so glad to see is on this call.
Kat,
Sure.
what about you?
Thank you. My name is Cat Coode. I'm an engineer in background. I spent over a decade working at BlackBerry, which used to be called RIM, doing software architecture and design. And I was there when iPhone launched and everybody jumped ship to iPhone because it was cooler and sexier. But what it was really doing was integrating all your data with all your other apps. And so that's what drove me to privacy, because I realized people didn't really understand how data was being transferred within phones and within devices and systems and services. Now I run my own consultancy, which is Binary Tattoo. And similar to Sharon, I help companies with I can never say the word, operationalization of privacy programs, but also privacy impact assessments, and really helping people bake privacy by design into the systems and services that they do, so that it's in the foundation of all of the things they're creating.
Thank you. Addison?
All right. Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here with Sharon and Kat and to talk about privacy. So Addison Brown, I'm a privacy specialist at Zscaler. Zscaler is a cloud security company, offers all the basic things for like just providing security solutions, but it's kind of hosted in the cloud. So it's a little different approach than the traditional security stack you normally see on-prem. So really cool technology. I've been at Zscaler for close to about 3 years. And I was brought on to build out our privacy program and to make it a little bit more robust and to mature it. I am on our legal team, and I've been doing this privacy work full time since law school. So I love building privacy programs, love talking about the topics, and being at Zscaler, I get to be in a unique position of kind of seeing the intersection between privacy and security and how security can support the efforts of building out privacy and helping other companies enable that as they're thinking about that transformation for their security. So.
Thank you. As a vendor in the cloud, in the SaaS, you probably guys have a lot of privacy questions. Who can see my data? What we can do with the data? It's actually going to be a topic we're going to discuss about it. So I'm Evgenyiy. I run 2 podcasts, one called Security Architecture and Cyber Inspiration, and I do consulting for MSSPs and vendors. And I have a pleasure to moderate the session today. So thank you very much. And we start with the first topic. There was a case in British Columbia in Canada when a woman basically didn't get paid because she claimed 50 hours a week. And the employer told her, oh, we have a device or malware, not malware, even endpoint security, monitoring what you're doing, and you only work for 20 hours. And now, this is an interesting question. Technology-wise, we can monitor, but privacy-wise, can we, as an employers, or can our employer monitor what we do? And if yes, in what cases? I guess, Addison, you were the last one, and you work for a vendor, so maybe you will start.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I want to caveat any response I have that should not be taken as legal advice. I can give my thoughts and my feelings around how you approach employee monitoring, because it's an interesting topic that's really different depending on, are you an organization that has more of a local footprint, or if you're global, and how are you balancing all of that out? So the way that I've always kind of approached it is that privacy really isn't this necessarily prescriptive thing. It's, you really have to kind of look at it from a principle standpoint, especially if you're looking at it from a global perspective as you're building out your program. And when it comes to employee monitoring, there's interest on the employer side for wanting to know and understand what the employees are doing and to make sure work is getting done. And then there's also the interest on the employee side of wanting to maintain their own autonomy and having their understanding. So it's really about how can you strike that balance. Probably the best thing you have in your toolkit is providing notice and being transparent from an employee standpoint, and making sure that anything that you are doing, you have some kind of justification that you can root into what's necessary for you. So interestingly enough, like in that case, it's like if you're having employees that are being billed, that are billing hourly, and that's what they're basing their pay off of, like, of course, I think an employer has an interest in wanting to know, like, when are they online? When are they actually being productive and doing work? So I would think that technology, I feel like spyware kind of has a loaded term for it. I think that it's just, I think that's like in the interest of the company of wanting to do that and to make sure that they're getting that quid pro quo, right? I mean, if you have an employee and you're paying them the salary to do the work, and you want to make sure the work is getting done and you're validating and monitoring that. I mean, because it also cuts the other way. Like if the employee wasn't getting paid what they should be getting paid, they could also reference that same data to go, well, I was online for 40 hours for the last month and you only like paid me out 30, right? So I don't know. That's why I think it's a balancing act. I don't think there's a real cut and dry thing, but your local jurisdictions also have rules around what that notice and what everything should look like. So you should reference that. But I think from a cultural standpoint and just being practical, it's striking that balance and communicating that, and I think a clear, transparent way.
Makes sense. Everybody that's listening to us right now, feel free to ask questions as well. We have several topics, and we're definitely going to answer your questions in the end as well. So there's a place here in Zoom to ask you questions. Sharon, what do you think about this topic?
Yeah, I think, Addison, you're absolutely right. There needs to be a balance between privacy interests and business interests. For employers, while it is very enticing to implement some of these surveillance tools, I think that businesses really need to think about, they need to think about three things. Is it actually necessary? Is it effective? And is it proportional? So is it really necessary to monitor your employees? Can you not just build some sort of a trust? Because oftentimes these tools are quite invasive and will diminish the trust within the organization when employees feel like they are being surveilled. Are they effective? Are they actually going to provide you with the information that you need, or are you collecting unnecessary information? And then finally, is it proportional? So if you are collecting personal information, possibly even sensitive personal information about your employees, is it the right balance between what you're trying to achieve and the rights of your employees? Addison, you talked about very different jurisdictions having different requirements for everyone on the call. In Ontario, more recently in I think it was October 2022, Bill 88 came into force, where businesses that have at least 25 employees will now need to prepare a policy, the electronic monitoring policy, which outlines all of the surveillance tools that you're using in your business to surveil your employees. Now, what you need to remember is just because you're not using a tool to specifically surveil your employees, but it has the ability to do so, you still need to include that in your policy. If you don't have any tools that are monitoring your employees, you still need to have that policy outlining that you don't have any tools to monitor. Some tools that you might not think are necessarily surveilling or monitoring your employees includes email, chat, of course, GPS would have it, your surveillance cameras around your buildings, your fobs. Those are examples of how you might be monitoring your employees without necessarily thinking that you are.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so sorry, just to jump in, but Sharon, I think that's like a really good example of actually thinking about that. From email is a really big one that I think like gets missed, because a lot of companies will implement like DLP technologies to secure their interests and making sure data isn't being left out of their organization. And that's a constant active processing. And especially in our more remote world where you have employees working globally, your devices and their accounts, they are probably using them for mixed purposes. So they may have personal emails and personal information flowing in and out of that inbox that you are technically processing and holding on to and may have access to. So they think there just needs to be, again, that transparency and notice. I think probably the best way to, like along with that policy you're saying, is the best way, I think, to bridge that gap and to kind of empower employees to set what's a reasonable expectation for their privacy when using work devices.
Just one last thing. I'm sure Kat has some amazing insights on this too. If you're going to use it to discipline your employees, then you need to notify them that you are going to use these tools for disciplinary purposes. If you're not going to notify your employees that this information will be used for disciplinary purposes, then I don't think you're going to, as an employer, I don't think that you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
Do I get to add? Yay. So everyone covered my points, but I'm going to add anyway. So there's a couple different things here that we have to keep in mind in terms of productivity. There are still companies who do this. You have the punch card. You come in, you punch in, you leave, you punch out. So we have always tracked people coming in and out of work, depending on their job. It's really, when we use the word surveillance, it's kind of going above and beyond that. But there are two things we're really tracking here with these surveillance tools. One of them is productivity, but the other one is security. And we likely have a large audience that are coming from the cybersecurity field, but we track, and Addison had mentioned DLP. We are also tracking a lot of things within our security tools for audit perspectives and logs. So every single time you want to monitor people's logins that are remote, like we have some amazing tools built into Office 365 is a great example, where you can, log in where people are coming in, so that if you log in from the US and 1 minute and an hour later you log in from Spain, it gets flagged. Like all of that stuff is theoretically surveillance, because you are surveilling people's logins, their habits, and all their behavioral, which is also a biometric. So we have all of this kind of stuff put together where, again, so we have the productivity and we have the security. And as Sharon perfectly said, we have to evaluate all of it on this necessity versus proportionality. I know 365 also has a wonderful tool that will tell you how many meetings someone attended a week and who they were with and who their connections are. So again, is this something that is necessary for your company? Is it necessary from a security perspective in order to be able to monitor? Is it necessary because you are doing this productivity? And then making sure all of those tools are included in this policy. I think, Sharon, you did say like the policy, it doesn't give people extra rights as an employee. Like our privacy laws don't cover employees that way. But what it does do is give transparency to say, hey, here's everything that we use, and here's how we're using it, and here's how we intend to actually deploy it for what purposes inside the company.
So it's an interesting point. If I'm a company that give people my own devices, laptops, workstations, whatever it is, can I say no privacy? You're using my technology. I can scan. I can do whatever I want. You're not allowed to do banking, health, private stuff in these devices. And if you do, basically, we'll know about it.
Well, so I think the answer to that is yes, you could. Is it realistic? No. So I mean, that's all going in terms of your policies of just your basic like acceptable use policy that you would execute around your IT devices and services and your overall principles. And you could say, no, you can't use this for any personal things, and there's no expectation of any privacy in that sense, right? But frankly, that's just not realistic in today's world. I mean, like we're talking about the connected world of privacy. We know that that's not going to be the case. I am not aware of any company that has such a strict policy that has operated successfully. So I think all companies really just have to think about, as like Sharon and Kat were talking about, that is it proportional? Are we actually getting the use out of the monitoring or surveillance that we are doing to accomplish our business needs, and balancing that against expectations, the reasonable expectations that an employee would have.
I mean,
Makes
I would
sense.
say if you as a company are providing a piece of hardware or software, you, like Addison said, in the acceptable use, however you want to do it, you are allowed to dictate how that is being used, 100%. So, I mean, if you have, some people carry multiple phones. I think I have 5 laptops in my office right now because they're all connected to different clients. Or I have different accounts that I have to log into in order to access information. So whether or not you're dividing things in a software perspective or by hardware, you as a company do have a right to do this. And although Addison said it's unrealistic, probably to actually deploy it in the world of remote work and in light of the pandemic, because so many people were like, oh, well, look, I have a laptop at home now, so now I'm going to let my kid use it for school, or I may as well use this for something else. Because it's so easy to do that, we are actually putting companies at risk that way, right? Because if you download the malware to the company laptop via whatever else you've downloaded, it's a fundamental problem. So I will say, if companies can be more regimented in saying, look, we've provided you this laptop and this laptop is for business purposes only, you have every right to do that. As you said, can you filter through someone's email? Do you have, again, necessity to do that? Like, is it you're representing our company and therefore anything you say has to be, approved by what we want it to do, and therefore we're allowed to look through your email? I don't expect someone to randomly look through my corporate emails, but I do know that they have the legal right to do that at any point, because it is their email.
So Bruce asked a question related to, we have a lot of new technologies and we're coming with new things all the time, like DLP, for example. So if a company introduces DLP or any other new technology, how often and what the best way for the company to let the employee knows there's a new piece of technology? Who wants to start? Kat, I'll let this. Oh, Addison, you want to start?
Oh, no, I mean, I just think that it's like interesting. I mean, I know we have other questions, but I think kind of touch on how I think the important thing. And I think it's speaking more to culture and change management practices than privacy. So I always like to view privacy more as building a culture instead of a prescriptive checklist. So when you're bringing DLP or even like a MDM, like managed device, like management, like platforms, those raise flags for any normal person, right? Around, okay, well, why are we doing this? Why are you worried about it? Why aren't you trusting me with being able to do the right thing? So I think it's about slowly like introducing that as like a concept, and really kind of taking it into phases. But so I think from my team standpoint, like from a privacy operationalizing it, I would work with those teams, put together the policies, help them understand what we need to do, what are the guardrails, and we would build it out. But then I would really look to like my people and culture or HR teams and change managers to really help to identify, well, what are the pockets of like teams that we can start with, and we can slowly kind of have it trickle down throughout the organization so that it's not such a harsh and blunt shot to the system, because your employees do need to feel trusted and valued and bought into the fact that this is helping the company to grow and move in a better direction. I know that sounds all high and fluffy,
No, it's good.
talking from like top down to below, but you really, I think, want to bring everyone back up to that same level of we're all on the same page, no one's in trouble. This is why we need to do this as we're growing. And a lot of times it's because of audit reasons. It's like as you grow as a company and as you're trying to do bigger things, different mechanisms and frameworks require you to take these steps as you're maturing.
Sharon, Kat?
Happy to add to that. And I think in the same light, we're talking about creating a privacy or security culture within your business. So if you have that as part of your DNA to your business, it's not a shock when all of a sudden you're introducing a DLP or any other kind of tool to protect your company. I think that it's important for your employees to feel like they're part of that mission, as opposed to, oh, they're monitoring me and what are they doing to our tool or our devices, and they're trying to find out what we're doing. I think everyone needs to really understand that we're all in this together and we're all trying to accomplish the same thing as a team. And so it becomes a lot easier when you are going through change management and introducing new policies or tools. Some things that we've kind of implemented with our clients is creating a privacy and security hub. So various messages come out of that hub, policies and procedures are there, FAQs are there. So if you have any questions, you could probably find the answer there, but it's quite interactive and it's constantly being updated and messages are coming out of that hub. And so that's one way of creating that culture.
We're going to move to next topic. I know there's more questions, but we'll definitely answer them in the end. So we mentioned the privacy part multiple times because it's a privacy session. We mentioned privacy program as well. So if somebody's starting a new company, if there is a better way to start the privacy program, or there's a different approach to start the privacy program, maybe everybody can kind of say what they think is the best way to start and make sure it's actually exist and continue and not dying after a certain time. Kat, I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, so this depends, because we've got small companies that are starting fresh with a privacy program, and then we have big companies that are coming to the realization that they need one, which is what we're actually seeing a lot now. And then they're trying to start a privacy program in an existing culture and an existing world. So they're a little bit different. So privacy and cybersecurity, we're a cost center. We are not a profit center. So right from the get-go, it is difficult to get the money for the resources, for the people, for the tools that we typically need to start these programs. And we know that. So really putting into perspective, for smaller companies, when you're small, and saying, what is our privacy philosophy in this company? Where do we find, so like, let's say you're a software company, you're producing software. If you have a deadline of Friday to do a release and you find a privacy issue, what's more important to you as a company, to get the release out on time or to fix the privacy issue? Like, where on that scale do you go? If you're marketing and you find you're taking a little bit of extra data, what's more important, building the trust with your customers or actually getting the data from an analytics to sell more? So there's scales for all of these things. So if you as a smaller company, especially, it's easier, like, and when I say small, I'm like 50 or less. If you as a smaller company can sit down and say, hey, here's how we all feel, then when these issues come up, it's very easy to say, hey, our philosophy is that deadlines are deadlines and we're out the door. Or our philosophy is privacy is always first and we will delay a deadline always to fix a privacy problem. There's no arguments. There's no like, hey, but that's not what the resourcing says. So that's from a smaller perspective. So establishing that kind of privacy philosophy, because your CFO, your marketing, your development team, and your legal team will have vastly different opinions on each of those answers. But from a bigger team, the real challenge is siloed business processes and policies. Trying to create policies that actually work for different departments that are already functioning basically as their own small companies is very, very difficult. And this is where tooling is often helpful. So in small companies, it's really people. But in bigger companies, I find you really kind of need that tool where you can say, okay, everyone's on this platform, everyone's on this tool, everyone's doing this thing, because you're not going to be able to grab everyone in a room or socialize sort of the same thing to everybody at the same time.
Sharon, do you want to add?
I'll add first of all, I completely agree with what Kat said. And like with a small company, we're talking about a centralized like governance, whereas with a larger, we're talking about decentralized, where the different functions all have the same philosophy, but different tools to execute on privacy based on their needs. But for me, when I usually start a privacy program, it usually starts with a data map, and people have different definitions of what a data map is. When I say data map, I'm talking about Where are you collecting data from? What data are you collecting? Who has access to it? What are you using it for? What lawful basis do you have for collecting it? Is it consent? Is it contract? Is it legitimate business interest? How long are you retaining it for? Who are you sharing it with? Where is it stored? What security measures do you have in place? The entire map of where your data is coming from, how are you using it? What I find is that whether you're a small business or a big business, you often have no idea. And it's shocking. And then we finally go through this process. And once we do, we can start to recognize, okay, what are the big risks in your program? Where is the sensitive information? Do we focus on that first? Do we focus on the third parties? Because you have like 300 third parties or vendors that you're sharing information with. It gives you a really good priority of where to focus when you want to start building.
Thank you. Addison, anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, I guess I'll just add the one thing. Like I said, I've gone into organizations that have built privacy programs, and that's like my thing, like starting them and kicking them off. And generally, you're starting off as the only person doing that. Like you're the only person that is wearing the privacy hat, and everyone's looking to you. So I've always found it really important to figure out the relationships you need to build, because to build that culture, you need to find partners and champions within the organization. So as Kat was also commenting, to help you get the funding and the resourcing, and to demonstrate that you should have a seat at the table and you should be invited to it frequently. So always figuring out those relationships. I normally start just to figure out, okay, if I'm entering into a company and organization, what are the drivers for it? What's moving the growth of the company and what's accelerating the company? And then I'm just thinking through, how can privacy enable that? So like with marketing as a good example, if that's really the place where they're trying to refine that pipeline and get as many people through it, right? It's like, okay, well, how can I make this a better experience for users and prospects that they're reaching out to? How can we refine the consent language? How can we tee up the notice? How can we even grow and mature that program to a consent preference management system, and helping them understand the back end so that they can build everything in a scalable and sustainable way? And then the second you start really adding that value, right, then more and more teams are going to want you to help them, and then that naturally will kind of stimulate your privacy program. So for all the security people that are here in your organizations, definitely reach out to your privacy person. We love talking to you all. You have those relationships in IT that we desperately want, especially for companies that are product focused, and getting in bed with the engineers and really focusing on those privacy by design principles. Like that's how we get in, is by talking to the people that know the people, and seeing how we can help.
So this is an interesting point. You mentioned privacy person. Let's say I'm starting a new company, and I want a privacy person. I understand I need a privacy person. Do I hire a privacy person? Do I make my HR a privacy person, my IT person? Who is the best person that will be fit to start with privacy? Because I don't think people can be able to have full-time privacy person when you just start. There's many other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Kat was saying, I think that's all going based off of what's important for the company, right? So like I would say, like for Zscaler, there's always someone that was doing something and touching on privacy. As a security company operating in the cloud, we want to have that element of trust with all of our customers, right? Like it's one of those pillars that we can't even look away from. But if you're like manufacturing, right, like and just making a product, like if you're selling lotion or shampoo, like yes, there's privacy and data and relationships things you have to think about, but maybe you're more worried about setting up your supply chain. Like you're more worried about distribution than you are looking at your marketing teams and what they are doing and how they and taking all of their leads and prospects and capturing all that data, right? They should focus on that eventually, but I can understand that fairly not being a priority for them, right, as they're growing.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. It's okay.
It's always the $1 million question of what department it should go under. I will say HR is probably the one I would not pick. If it's between legal or your CTO, CIO, CISO, I would go with the technical side. I would go with the information security or the CTO, because ultimately, as Sharon had said, it's about the data. Like the legal stuff will fall in place. If you are minimizing the amount of data you're collecting, you've safeguarded it, you're protecting it, you're not retaining it. If you're doing all of that properly, the legal check marks for all of these regulations will be done for you. So you don't want to be driven from the top about what you should be doing. You want to be driven from the bottom of where is the data. And that is always under the technical side. So when we're looking for what kind of job is that, if you've got, I think Addison said it perfectly, if you've got like highly sensitive data, if you're making shampoo, whatever, you get someone to kind of manage it on the side. But if you are a medical company, like if you're a small company doing medical anything, I don't care if you're 10 people, if you're making an electronic health record, it doesn't matter if you're a company of 10 or a company of 10,000, you are handling the same level of sensitivity of that data. You need an assigned privacy person to help manage that data. So if it's highly sensitive, you should have someone assigned to really making sure everything's in place. And if it's less sensitive, then somebody could also do a double job. Like you could have a privacy analyst, you could have a chief privacy officer.
Yeah, I was going to add, having worked with small to medium businesses primarily, they often don't have the resources to hire someone full time. And even if they wanted to delegate that role to someone internally, no one really has the expertise, right? So to be able to identify privacy risks, if you don't have the expertise to do that, how are you going to do it? So a lot of my clients will hire a fractional or virtual privacy officer. Could be 10 hours, could be 40 hours a month. And they help them to start to identify and operationalize privacy. And the best engagements, for example, if we're hired to do that, the best engagements are the ones where they will delegate at least a privacy lead. And that person is invested in privacy. And there's that conduit between the external privacy expert and the business, and they will carry it on forward once they start to learn from your external expert. I also get the question, well, should we just park it in legal? And my question is always back to them. Legal will absolutely tell you what the laws are, but are they going to operationalize it for you? Do you want your lawyer to be running after the people in your business, asking them, hey, have you remediated this risk yet? Did you fill out the data map? That is like the worst use of their time. Let them do what they were hired to do. And they get paid well to do it. So don't waste their time running around people. Get a privacy lead that can actually do the day-to-day work.
So if you're starting a company or part of the company, allocate a budget for privacy, not all full-time or part-time, probably start with part-time, understand your maps, understand what's happening to move forward. Let's kind of turn upside down. If I'm a consumer, and we're all consumers in the end of the day, and every day we are going to use a new tool or buy a new service, what do I need to look for for privacy perspective? Because I don't think everybody reads the 18 pages document. Some maybe do. But again, what does need to go in my mind? Maybe it's a dating site. Maybe it's a social network site. Maybe it's an e-store. What should I pay attention?
So my quick trick, if it's a global company and they operate out of California, California has this wonderful regulation that says you have to update your privacy policy annually. If you go into their privacy policy and it's dated over a year ago, they don't care about privacy. Because if they cared about privacy, they would at least be following that one thing of going in and updating the date. Even if everything else is a lie, they would have updated the date. So that's my very quick telltale, like, oh, this has not been updated in a long time. But you're saying nobody reads them. But to me, if you're online and you're on a website, if you can run, there's all sorts of things that go on to Chrome and Safari that will tell you the amount of trackers on a website. That will tell you pretty quickly how much extra information is being pulled in terms of marketing and cookies and pixels that is going from one site to another and retargeting. And if you land on a site and it's not rated well, then you know that this company is pulling information that's not strictly necessary, that isn't necessary to run their product. So that's a quick trick to kind of see where their privacy gauge is.
Sharon?
I mean, I guess. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
We're just popcorning. Oh, no, sorry. I mean, I guess for me, I'm always thinking of the context of what service or product I'm engaging. I'm naturally skeptical of any kind of free service because they're making their money somehow. And it just being in my world, I know the ways that they make that money with the data. So if I feel like I trust the company, or depending on what I'm getting, right? I mean, I'm probably like a terrible privacy person in this because I'm like, this is the trade-off that I'm getting. I know they're going to send this to a database and I'm going to be sold off to all these lead gen list vendors and someone will buy my data and I'll just hit the unsubscribe button at the end of the day. So I would just kind of look through the context, but if I'm really worried about a particular vendor or something that I'm trying to use or new service or product, I like, if I'm going into the privacy section, I'm opening it up and I'm going straight to the disclosures. So privacy notices all pretty universally across all jurisdictions that require them. You have to have some part in it that it talks about when and why you make disclosures to third parties. And even if it's not a super accurate take of it, you can at least get a good sense of the types of the partners and the relationships that they will have. And sometimes they'll even make outright commitments of that we won't. So you can actually hold them accountable to that down the line if you do find that your information has made it into the hands of other people that you're not sure how it got there. So that's the one section I would always jump to is third-party disclosures. It's normally the heading for it.
Yeah, so my answer was going to be very similar to Addison's. I always want to know who they're sharing my information with, including their parent company, right? And where is their parent company? Are they in the US? Are they in China? Are they in Russia? Like, where are they? And that will give me a pretty good indication of how my data is going to be traveling around the world and what jurisdiction will have access to my information. I think for me, like the big one is just as I start using an app or a service or a tool, it's just what kind of information are they asking me for? Like if they want access to my bank statements, like they're gonna have access to all of my transactions and they're gonna learn a lot about me. My likes, they're gonna prepare a profile around me. Am I willing to give that up? Do I want them to have all of that information just so that I can get a few benefits? To me, I don't think that's a really good trade-off. Maybe to some people it is, but I look for what kind of information they want about me, including location information. Do I really want to give you my location at all times? No.
Fair.
And I mean, as we talked about, the notice also has that as a discrete section that a lot of laws require to have. So that's another section you can jump straight to. It's normally near the top. The types of data that's collected and why, and then jump to the who they're sharing it with.
Thank you. I know that we have some issue with the chat. Chat is enabled right now so people can better communicate. We also have tons of questions. We'll try to get to them. If we don't get to them, we promise to put the answers later on the website. We'll email everyone where it is located. Let's talk about a favorite topic for the last 4 or 5, 6 weeks, ChatGPT. It came as a surprise to everyone. And basically, for the last month and a half, if you go to the internet, somebody will post something about it. And unfortunately, if you read very quickly, you understand that whatever you put there, OpenAI, the parent company, can see what's happening and can basically do whatever they want with this, I'm guessing. So what do we do? How do we educate people or not educate people? Just trust ChatGPT, and Google is bringing their own platform as well soon. Any advice on the privacy and systems that help us do cool stuff? Sharon, you're smiling.
Yeah,
Who wants to go first?
Yeah. This one's a can of worms. I mean, we've got algorithmic bias, which we've always had a problem with, which is how you train systems. And depending on how the system is trained, it does whatever it wants to do. And initially the system was trained by whatever group of people are sitting in the US. So it's already kind of biased into this first world sort of perspective to begin with. The risk with this stuff it's actually an old school risk that we always had. When people are like, oh, I've been hacked because somebody sent an email to all of my contacts. It's not because you were hacked. It's because you downloaded an app and that app said, hey, can I have access to your contacts? And you went, yeah, sure. And then it then had access and then emailed them all out. So this is what we're having. So I could go on ChatGPT and say, you know what, I want to send a holiday card to everyone in my address book. So here is everyone in my address book, go do that. And now, like you're saying, they now have access to that data. So I have now given out emails and contact information for a whole bunch of people without their consent, without their authority, that ChatGPT or Bard or whoever, whichever service you have, is now using in any way that they want. And we're going to see the same thing. We're already seeing it with photographs, with all sorts of other things that you can upload into this AI. Without the consent of the people who have either created it. We're seeing artists are having their work ripped off by AI generative art. So this is going to continue to proliferate. And unfortunately, it's one of those things where there isn't an easy answer here to just say, hey, if you don't use it, you'll be safe. Because again, you're now at the mercy of everyone else who has your private information and them loading it into the system, not on your behalf, but behind your back or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's so hard to answer this question, like for me, because I feel like I just don't know what the implications are yet. It's still so new, and I think we're all trying to navigate it. There was one term that someone else had termed in their article. I wish I knew who it was, but I'm not going to take credit for it. And really, they said this is a breach of contextual integrity. And that's where I think it really hits home for me. You're putting information on the web or in the public about yourself, and you think that you're doing it for one particular purpose or in a certain context. Now, ChatGPT, like many other AI tools, is taking a lot of that publicly available information, including the information that you put out there, which could be personal information, and then using it for a completely different context. And had you known it would have been used for that context, perhaps you wouldn't have put it out in the first place. And so I do feel like there is that issue where we're going to see a lot of information that is being used in a very different way than its original and intended purpose. Just before I went on, whether or not this was smart, I still did it. And I might get lots of people like shaking their head at me, but I went on to ChatGPT and I asked it to tell me what it knew about Sharon Bauer. And surprisingly, it like didn't give me an answer. It just said like, we don't know who Sharon Bauer is. Like you would have to give us more information. Then I put, tell me who Sharon Bauer is at Bamboo Data Consulting. And still, it would not give me any information about me. Surprisingly, there is a lot of information out there about me, and my name is on the internet. And I was surprised that it didn't pull out a lot of that information. So that's why, like, honestly, I have no idea what is going on with ChatGPT yet. I will learn and I will report once I know.
Well, I mean, I think that's just like, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. This technology is it being true AI? Like we're not quite there. This is super advanced ML with language, a robust natural language database. But I agree that it's probably a little too soon to really figure out what the pitfalls are. But on the back end of that, I think what I'm a little bit interested in seeing what's going to develop is, are we going to be getting a larger mass of inferential personal information, where those inferences that can be derived based off of how you're interacting with the tool? So where maybe ChatGPT doesn't know who Sharon Bauer is now, but as you're interacting and putting in questions with it, like, is it then forming an understanding of who you are that where someone can go? Like, and that opens up an entire can of worms, right? You could be entering, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what are all of the symptoms of like some heart condition or some heart disease or even pregnancy, right? And then does someone have the capability then to go, hey, can you tell me about Sharon Bauer? Oh, Sharon Bauer may be pregnant or may have a heart condition or maybe doing all of these different things. It's like, how do you put guardrails about it and can contain that? It's like, are we now building up those different kind of identities on a different platform based off our interactions with it? It's almost like that, taking the marketing ecosystem as it is now and putting names to it, potentially. Like, how do we prevent that from happening as it's growing?
Right. And as an individual, you have rights. So you can request, access to your information, deletion of your information. How do you do that with ChatGPT? So if it does have all this information about me, how can I say, hey, ChatGPT, can you not use my name? Can you delete it from your AI system? I don't know if it can. I don't think it can. So there are lots of issues around this.
Then this is integrity for information as well. Like, can someone that committed a crime or did something really terrible then opt to have all this deleted, and then there's no context for it? So yeah, I don't really
but
know
you
how
also will have to
that.
prove that you're Sharon Bauer to delete, because while maybe, as Addison was saying, somebody else can remove your information, my information. By the way, Sharon, when I asked ChatGPT, he didn't find me as well. Okay, so don't worry about it. You're not the
I
only
feel
one.
much better, thank you.
So it's a very interesting point. We're going to switch topics again and talk about consent. We spoke before about parent company maybe give information to somebody else. There was an issue with Home Depot recently when they were sharing data with a Meta. And I don't think anybody has signed this or knew about this. I guess it's a problem, but what we can do to help, what we can do to prevent this potentially. Addison, what do you think?
I mean, I'm probably going to have the unpopular position here because I'm going to have a lot of bad things to say without a solution, right? I feel it's a kind of a growing topic with privacy professionals where consent is just being criticized in general as, is this actually even useful or the direction that we need to be going in terms of transparency and engaging with all the different data subjects and end users we have with understanding data? Because so far that's only really manifested in drafting this notice that we reference with all of the section and taking a snapshot in time of the information. So informed consent, I think it's just really difficult because it's you need that level of engagement from the person on the other side that's giving it to you. You have to share what you're doing and make sure they're understanding it and getting that feedback from them that they do understand it. So I think consent is really challenging in a lot of places. And in the Home Depot case where you're collecting information, right? Like they were collecting the emails of the cash register and the person was just had the expectation of getting the receipt, right? But the business, maybe even fairly on the back end, was just thinking through, oh, well, our notices and everything says this, and maybe there's this fine print, and we're going to do this to enable a better thing for them. So it's it's just, I don't know, it's just really tough. I don't know how you do it because there's so many different variables, because you're dealing with other people's expectations. You're dealing with not really having great channels or vehicles to keep them informed on what you're doing. And then there's also when companies are growing and they want to improve, and sometimes this is always happening, these things happen with the goal of enhancing someone's experience, right? Your customer's experience. You do something that defies their expectations, and there's in businesses are generally shocked as to why this would be a concern for them when you're doing something or adding value. So I don't really know, because once someone gives you that consent to and they sent the email and you have that different use case, how do you keep them up to date on a new notice and making sure that they understand all of that? Informed consent's just really, really tough to operationalize. I don't know the better way, but I'm hoping someone smarter than me comes up with it soon.
Yeah, if you're in privacy and you want to make an enemy in a company, it's always marketing and commercial. And I think Addison phrased it really beautifully that marketing legitimately believes they're doing good. But by having more information, I can then target this. And then the argument is always look, I don't have babies, so I don't want ads for diapers. But marketing saying, look, I'm not going to give you ads I know you so well that I know your kids are too old for diapers. I'm not going to show you ads for diapers. It really sounds like it's beneficial. And there's usually a disconnect between marketing and privacy. So I agree with what Addison was saying. I'm sure Home Depot, the marketing department was like, hey, let's do this and collect emails at this point. The privacy department probably wasn't even involved because it's two separate things. But for the last 10, 15 years, we've grown marketing departments on analytics with data, with website visits and behaviors and analytics and all of this stuff and data broker data. And so now going into companies and saying, hey, I know you've always used this, but you don't actually have permission to use this. They're like, no, but we've always used it. So we're just gonna, we already have it. So what am I going to do? Give it back? Like, and so just one example is a professional company I have has the professional email addresses of all of their potential users. And they used a data broker to match it with their personal email addresses. And then we're flashing up ads on their home Rokus and Hulus in the US based on their personal email address. And so I had to say, and again, in privacy, we always have to find the politically correct way of putting this. But, you know, I had to say, like, I appreciate that you guys have the ability to do this and a company is offering you this ability, but you don't actually have the consent of your professionals to show them ads in a personal way. You don't have you're not allowed to do that. And they're all just shaking their heads and going, but we have it already. Like, we already have it. And this professional company that's a data brokerage essentially is established to already do this. So they wouldn't sell the service if it was illegal. And so it's a very difficult position that we're in right now, trying to get consent for things that people have already been doing.
What if somebody doesn't like it? If I see such commercial on my Roku, what do I do?
But how would you know? How would you know that it isn't just a coincidence that you had a Zscaler ad and you happen to be in cyber? Like, how do you know? You don't know. So that's the thing. You're like, oh, that's funny. There's an ad that's something that I might use. You don't actually know that it's a coincidence.
So basically, you said the company can do this because people will not know. It's almost like a loophole in a way.
There's no way to track it. There's no way to go back to Hulu and say, why did you specifically show me this ad?
Well, yeah, and I mean, and that again, that's the other challenge of informed consent, right? It's like, it's tough for you to know fully what's happening in complex data sharing supply chains like that at every stage. And it's even tough for, I would even say, any standard company that's engaging marketing services to truly know how that ecosystem is working on the back end. There's a lot of diligence you can do to stay ahead of it. But the accountability even principle is tough. Like, it's, once you collect someone's consent to get something and use their data, like, and that data is being moved through the universe that we now have in our connected world, it's tough to identify all the places where that person can hold whoever's processing their data accountable. A privacy notice, frankly, would be thousands of pages long, probably for certain organizations, really doing all of that tracking. So it's tough. It's tough for a consumer, I think, to figure out how to challenge that.
So I think it's also tough for a business, to be honest. We have businesses that have e-commerce sites, and it's a complete web of vendors and third parties who are helping them to optimize sales, get analytics. And, you know, the question is, coming from Home Depot, are you supposed to list every single third party and vendor that you're using? And do you, okay, fine, maybe for notice, but probably not, probably unrealistic. But do you need to get consent to use every single one and to share information with every single one? I'm going to argue, no, that's like impossible and unnecessary. So with Home Depot, the decision, like, if you're going to look at it from a very high level, one might say, oh, to share information back with Meta, so Meta can give you a report of how their online advertisement translated to in-store sales, you need to seek consent. I don't necessarily think you do. You need to seek consent because Meta was using that data for a secondary purpose, which was they took all of the information that Home Depot sent to them. Hey, you know, Sharon Bauer bought lumbar on this day, spent this much money, and this is, you know, the code, whatever, and they match it to my profile on Facebook. Facebook was creating a bigger and bigger profile about consumers and then retargeting them with ads that were completely unrelated to Home Depot. That is a secondary purpose. So, you know, my question is theoretically, or Cat and Addison, if you know the answer, I would love it. If Facebook was not using it for a secondary purpose, would this case even exist? Would the OPC require Home Depot to seek the consent of consumers so that Home Depot can share the information with Meta just to get the analytics? Because I can think of many other vendors that do the exact same thing, give analytics about sales, and aren't using it for a secondary purpose. do we need to get their or consumers' consent to share it with those vendors?
I'm already arguing it is a secondary purpose, because if I'm providing my email to Home Depot to get my receipt, I don't expect them to give my email to anyone for any reason. So beyond the fact that Facebook took that and then was remarketing to those individuals, I don't expect Home Depot to be handing my email off to anyone except for their database in order to email their receipt. That's the purpose.
Okay, so I'll ask you in a different way. Like, if I'm sure you have many clients who have vendors, and your clients share information with those vendors for analytic purposes, are they seeking consent from their consumers to do so?
But the analytics should be aggregated or de-identified. Like, this is a strictly like identifiable piece of information. So I would say yes, if you are handing over, if it's not part of the system, service, or product, and you are handing over that information strictly for analytics, then yes, I'd say that's a secondary purpose, because it is not part of the delivery of the product or service that you've signed up for.
So for example, your CRM tool, they're collecting personal information about your customers. Do you need to seek consent to use a CRM tool?
But they're not, because Salesforce doesn't use that information, right? The instance for your company is kept separate. Salesforce doesn't have access to all the emails that are in Salesforce.
Okay, but you're right. They're not using it for a secondary purpose. In this case, Meta was using it for a secondary purpose. So
Sharon and Kat, I'll interject you for a second. We only have 4 minutes left.
Oh, crap.
I know time flies very fast when we're having fun. We have a lot of questions. I don't think we have enough time to answer the questions, but what we will do, we'll collect the questions and we'll answer them later on the website. Meanwhile, literally 1 minute each. When you cannot sleep during the night, what are you thinking about? Like, what is it preventing you from sleep from a privacy perspective? Sharon, maybe you will start.
For me, it's honestly my kids' privacy. I have 2 kids that are coming of an age where they're very interested in devices and social media. And the thought that they might be putting information out there is extremely frightening. It's also extremely frightening that school boards are not educating our children on the safety of their data. There's nothing, as far as I can see, in my children's curriculum about how to protect your information, how to keep it private. They're giving our children like a car to drive without teaching them how to drive. And that is a very scary thing. So that is what keeps me up.
Sharon, thank you. Kat?
The sheer number of companies that have come out with new product services, especially in the pandemic, moving things online, that have zero awareness of privacy, especially access control. And so companies are digitizing electronic medical records and digital ID and access to financial records without actually putting the proper like security and privacy safeguards in place to handle that sensitivity of information.
Thank you. Addison?
I'd piggyback off Kat, and I would also just add like IoT devices and just different plugins and APIs that are being used for the sake of convenience, like all browsers and all the app stores and different ways in which you can connect different services to different things for all of these different synergies. It's like creating larger webs of data sharing that we've kind of talked about like in the marketing context and a lot of other spheres from everyone's day-to-day, by the way that they're living their day-to-day. So that keeps me up at night around, are we putting the right ethics and framework around it?
So you don't trust your toaster, but you connect the toaster to the internet. I can understand this part, yeah. Thank you, everyone. It was great to have all of you here. This is our first event, but we're going to have many more events. We're going to have another event in March that we will talk about cyber insurance. The event will be on March 25th, and it will be sponsored. I'm not sure yet who will sponsor it, but I don't remember. Maybe, Franz, you remember right now? If not, we'll announce it later on. And we'll do much better job with the chat enabled from the beginning. And don't forget, we're going to answer all your questions later on the website. Thank you, everyone.